Welcome everybody to Boston Office 365 User Group.
Yeah. So let's
Get started here. So for those of you that are new, the listing up on the screen right now has all the fun locations you can communicate with us, follow us online. Our Twitter account actually fires off a lot of Office 365 updates as soon as we hear about them. So please feel free to follow that. And also, if there are any feature requests that you guys have, like any user voices, we're big fans of retweeting out to the entire community any user voices that you guys want voted up. So feel free to use us in that way. We enjoy doing that. All right. So these are the organizers of our group. We've got Dimitri, who's standing at the back of the room there. Myself, I'm Mike Dixon. Mr. Losey is joining us online, and Jeff may or may not be online. Say hi, Jeff. Or not. Say hi if you're there. So last time we did a practical, non-technical approach to teamwork in Office 365 with Michael McNett. The video, I believe the video for that is available on YouTube at this time, and the deck is available on our website. So feel free to check all of that out. And then, since last time, a few updates that have come out. There's a new Office app for Windows 10, available to everyone. Okay. So this is basically the Windows version of the mobile app. Basically an app that gives you a list of all of the other applications that are available for Microsoft services. So that's now available on Windows 10, whereas before this was only available as a iPhone and Android app. So Power Apps has gotten some new components. There are now reusable controls. So components are publicly available and will no longer require a preview environment. So basically the announcement here is that this was in preview and is now available in the regular environment without having to go to preview mode. Has anybody been using any of this? Anybody? Anybody using Power Apps? Just Rachel? Okay. All right, 2 people. Very good. All right. We also now have responsive controls. Wow. Something here. Oh, okay, so there's now the ability to write control that will make the resizing adaptive based on sizing. So that's also new to Power Apps. Microsoft Flow is now introducing custom response options for approvals. So the approval process that's built into Microsoft Flow now has more flexibility. So, as opposed to just the approve or reject options that were available initially out of the box, we can now create our own custom responses. Planner has a new copy plan feature. Okay, cool. Very nice. So previously in Planner, you could actually copy a single task from one bucket to another or from one plan to another. We can now copy an entire plan. So this can be really helpful if you're doing project-based plan, and you want to be able to easily replicate this, it basically gives you the ability to preload a whole bunch of tabs, save that as a template, copy that template into the others. So here's one that I noticed. Update to Microsoft To Do. Any flagged emails are now automatically presented as an optional list in Microsoft To Do. And Microsoft Forms Pro is now available in preview mode.
Hey Mike, what is that? I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this one last month. I think last month was the first month that they actually acknowledged that this was coming and going to exist. But they were very vague about what was actually included with it. Surveys, quizzes, and polls. It's basically just going to be a more robust version of the existing Forms platform. And going to have some integration into Microsoft Dynamics. I also saw an update that came out a couple of weeks ago that you can now embed Microsoft Forms directly into Stream. So you can have it set up basically where somebody's watching a video that's been published on Stream, you can embed either a form that would maybe have either feedback or maybe even a quiz. So if you're doing like a training video, then you can embed a quiz right at the end and have the quiz maintained by Microsoft Forms. So I don't have a lot of information about what's available in Forms Pro and how that's different from the regular Forms. But we'll keep an eye on that and get back to you guys. Unless there's anybody in here that knows. Anybody poke around with Forms Pro yet? No? I'll take some poking around on that next week. I'll let you guys know where to find it. But it sounds neat. All right, and a huge thanks to our sponsor, Turn Digital. They pay for all of our grub, and they're helping with a lot of our overhead and, take care of all the stuff that we need to get this group organized. So, big thanks to them. And with that, we are going to turn it over to Mr. David Feldman, who's going to present for us designing and building modern intranets with communication sites. Sounds good. All right, David. So anytime you're ready, go ahead and share your screen.
Awesome. Can you guys see us okay? So I have with me Dave Cohen, who is the father of communication sites. Is that a fair way to describe it?
No one's ever called me that before, but I was the project lead for communication sites and overall drive the SharePoint portals business. So, hi everyone, thanks for having me here.
I figured it was a pretty amazing opportunity being out here to actually pull in the product team to our conversation and get to ask any questions about this directly to the guy who's kind of driving the vision of this. So please ask lots of questions as we're going inside here. And let me see.
And just so all of you know, I may be out here in Seattle, but born and raised in Connecticut, went to UConn. So I feel like this is kind of a home crowd for me.
Awesome. Are you guys seeing presenter view or are you seeing the presentation view?
Top right.
I don't think they're seeing anything.
Are you seeing anything?
Seeing you guys.
We just see you.
Oh, we're beautiful, but that's not what we want. All right, let me try that again. I want
Screen 2.
Screen 2. How about now?
There you go.
Excellent.
Now we got it.
Awesome. So I wanted to kind of take a focus on both the designing and building your intranet with communication sites, just to get a kind of sense of it. And there's not a camera pointed at you. So Mike, you'll have to tell me how many hands sort of go up. How many folks have played with communication sites in the past? What do we have?
10 hands up here.
About 10 hands up. Awesome. So a chunk of folks, but certainly not everyone in the room. So I'm going to walk through kind of the why, how, and what, a little bit of all of those things. And, between Dave and I think we should be able to answer any questions that you guys have as we're going. So I'm going to start it just kind of open mic. Why build an intranet? Just get some thoughts from you guys.
Anybody? Any ideas?
Corporate communication.
Why build it?
Yep.
Enhanced collaboration.
Enhanced
Landing page, new employees.
Yep.
On the landing page, the company's information, where things could start spiraling out from.
Yeah, great. All really good reasons. So I threw a couple on here, and I think we're pretty well aligned on these. That we started even in the same order. Corporate communication. How do I get messages out to employees? Some knowledge management. How do I find content? How do I find the right people? One of the ones I see a lot in my organization is access to tools. How do I find the right way to do an expense report? How do I figure out, where our benefits are, like all that sort of information? Connecting people, like for the company that I work at has like 300 locations around the globe in all different time zones. I would much rather connect with people electronically rather than having to, do meetings at 9 o'clock at night to talk to folks in Tokyo. And the last one I think is maybe the most important of them, which is, when you have a big giant company where I think intranets get the most kind of focus and investment, being able to take a group of people and align them, engage them, get them all rowing in the same direction to try to achieve the same outcomes. Sound pretty close?
Yep.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different recipes you can use to be able to get there. And I want to kind of start by talking about, where SharePoint came from. Some of the, the classic kernels, what is it, like?
Original recipe.
The original recipe, 30, 40 spices, something like that, all thrown together to create this delicious looking, crispy, awesome thing. Because I think it gets a lot easier inside the modern world. And I want to maybe talk about that very briefly, just in case there's anyone who's at that precipice right now and thinking, do I want to go with the old proven or do I want to go with this new thing? I think that this will help sort of spur some good conversations to think about. So in the original classic recipe, I started out with one of these. This is a classic publishing site. And you can see you don't start out with a tremendous amount. You've got a nice big blank canvas and some links, some text of things you might want to consider. Very often people started off with this. It's a classic team site because the root of your SharePoint online tenant is always a team site. There was never a publishing site at the root of your tenant. So a lot of people took one of these and said, let's go see if I can turn that into my intranet. If you're really unlucky, maybe you end up with one of these, or maybe you're coming from something that started off as one of these, a 2007 on-prem, regardless of which one it is, those are all kind of the same underlying technology. So the kind of the ingredients are going to be the same in that recipe. Often people started off with one of these, some master pages, combination of some JavaScript, some C# controls that ran in the background to go render some stuff out. As they moved to SharePoint Online, that wasn't so cool, so you ended up with some of these, a whole bunch of script editor web parts, embedding a bunch of client-side JavaScript all over the page, and then we threw in some of these. So in classic SharePoint Online, we had script, in 2013, we had script editors, content editors, JS link, display templates. I know, Dimitri, you're smiling as I do this. I'm sure some other folks in the room, have taken each of these, right? Some user custom actions to be able to put headers and footers on pages. I know I've done more than my fair share of all of those in ancient history. And you put it all together and you get a beautiful looking homepage that looks exactly like this. So to your users, it might actually look more like this. And you'll notice we sort of map these, right? So if you look at like the header area, the featured news on here, their chatter, their favorites, all of that, like it maps, same sort of concept. So that's how I would have achieved something like that, right? Is a bunch of custom JavaScript pieced together, all living in that same page. And I guarantee the performance on this was probably awesome on the day that it launched. 6 months later, you know, while you're away on vacation, you get a phone call that something's broken. It doesn't look and feel quite the same way as it did before. Something went wrong, and you've got to go through all of those script editor web parts and figure out what's going wrong and what dependency broke inside there, and try to put it together. And you might feel a little bit like this. So I want to offer an alternative that I think is a better way of going about it. I just recently went through this. So I know most of you guys, or a bunch of you, and you know, I worked for Shire probably last time I saw you, but January 8th, Shire got acquired by another company called Takeda. So just to kind of talk about that story, they had a classic intranet with master pages and script editors and performance issues and reliability issues and all of those things. And when I found out in October we were getting acquired and that they were going to go from 30,000 users to 60,000 users, we were kind of worried it was going to fall over on day one. So we had 2 months to completely and totally redesign their intranet from the ground up, from concept to completion. You know, starting October, had to be live by January 8th, which was the day that the acquisition went through. So not a huge amount of time, and we're going to kind of walk through what that you know, beautiful SharePoint kind of option is with communication sites. I showed this deck to Dave a few minutes ago, and he's like, "That's in Hawaii, isn't it?" And it's a picture I took from Kauai that you know, I thought was a much nicer picture than the previous one of getting punched.
That's how we want communication sites to make you feel.
It's better, right? Start. So please ask questions and jump in along the way, but I want to kind of start with some of the model around this. So within a SharePoint site, you've got a bunch of pages. I call them out by name because they're called site pages. That's maybe important because you can actually turn on site pages in classic sites. So if you want to be able to interleave these, site pages can live on a classic site. There is a feature you can activate, and then site pages will exist there. They're very different than your classic publishing pages or wiki pages. Inside each one of those, just kind of logically thinking about it, you've got like the header and footer stuff, the Chrome, but within the body of the content, you've got a collection of these sections. And then each of those sections have web parts inside it. I just wanted to kind of frame out what the pieces are that we're talking about. So if I try to marry the UI you're going to see with those terms, you're building up a collection of sections, things like 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, you know, wide on the right, wide on the left, full width. Those are your sections that you're designing. And then a bunch of web parts, things you might stick inside there. Text, images, file viewers, roll-ups of content, all sorts of stuff like that. Questions are good? Good?
No question, but I want to make one comment because we're using Modern right now. This whole new 1 column, 3 column thing, this makes it look really, really good on your phone. It is incredibly good. The SharePoint app works.
Are you talking about the full width column?
Full width, 1 column, the whole way that they've split it, it's designed so that it works in the app, and it actually does work.
That's great to hear. Yeah, that was entirely our goal. We wanted to make sure that you were only responsible for laying out your content on your page, and when the different device sizes that someone might use to look at it, we would reflow that in the best way for that device. And so, you know, I'll be honest, we've gotten some feedback. Some people would like to tweak that behavior, but overall, we wanted to make it so it was basically a no-op for the person designing the site. We would take care of reflowing it.
Yeah. I'm definitely a big fan of that. I mean, even to kind of pile onto that, within the mobile app, even your navigation, that Chrome gets pulled into the actual structure of the app. So it works really nicely. So we like it. We think it's a good thing. We understand the basic pieces of it. How do we get started? So the first thing, if I were to kind of guide someone along the path here, is I would say the first thing to do is you want to get inspired. You want to understand, what can this do? Like, what are the core capabilities? How can this thing look? Get some ideas.
And I'll just interject a little bit here, because I talk to a lot of customers who ask us, hey, Microsoft, how do I rebuild my classic portal in modern? And then the list of questions comes. How do master pages work? You know, how do I use the content editor Webpart or the script editor Webpart? And the best way to approach modern is to start by the way that Dave's about to present, which is to look at what's possible and to totally rethink it, and start from really like a WYSIWYG perspective. The goal with communication sites was to bring consumer grade ease of use to SharePoint, right? So if you look at Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, you know, the sites that let, you know, someone whose great skill in life is producing a loaf of bread, right? A baker can have a great looking website. We wanted your corporate comms person to have that same capability, right? They're responsible for engaging their organization. They're not a web developer, right? They don't need to worry about that. And we wanted to make it that easy for them to just have an image in their head for how they wanted their content to get laid out, and make it as easy as possible for them to do it. And so that's why, you know, don't start from the perspective of how do I take these classic concepts and make them modern. Start with how you want modern to look, and look at the bits and pieces to make that possible, because you'll forget and let go of a lot of the classic concepts.
It's funny. I had a conversation, Mike Dixon, you'll appreciate this, with one of the guys on the Teams team who's responsible for kind of federation. And I asked apparently a dumb question yesterday, which was, how does SIP federation work with an external person? If I want to, I am Dave Cohen at Microsoft, how does that work? And he's like, no, SIP isn't a thing anymore. Like, and I asked the question a different way. And he's like, no, you don't get it. What you're asking me is, where's the carburetor, but you're driving a Tesla. Like, there is no carburetor. Pieces are different. Like, it works differently. It's designed differently. Like, it's a whole mindset shift. Yes. And I actually really liked that analogy of you know, kind of putting me in my place of like, no, like, you can ask the question 10 different ways. It doesn't matter. Throw out all of your old ideas and start over. And so that's kind of what we're going to do a little bit. Yeah. There's a resource that got put together by the team called the SharePoint Lookbook. Another sort of show of hands with a proxy pair of eyes. How many folks in the room have seen the SharePoint Lookbook before?
We have about 6 hands.
About 6 hands. All right, great. So
in addition to the lookbook, how many people have seen the SharePoint design guidance site that kind of goes along with it? They're technically separate sites, but they do go hand in hand.
We have 2.5 hands.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So the design guidance site, if the lookbook is how you get inspired, the design guidance site, and I can shoot Dave a quick IM so he can paste it into the meeting. Yeah. The design guidance site is how you can achieve the look that you got inspired by.
Cool.
If you need to modify the way the site looks, the site headers, or build your own web parts, right? And how you would style those web parts. We have guidance on all of that. And so I'll go ping Dave the address for that.
That's awesome. So I'm going to just flip over.
Dave, question. Question. So was modern changing as fast as it is changing? Came in Tuesday and there was the mega menu. How up to date is this information? How relevant is it to what modern is this week versus last week?
Was that comment about the fact that the mega menu was turned on by default?
No, it's just it does this reflect.
Modern is changing.
Oh, do these sites are they kept relevant is the question. Mm-hmm. Yes. So if you go look at the lookbook, it has badges for things that are coming soon. we will do our best to remove those badges as things get live, and we will rev this ideally, honestly, probably on a quarterly basis. So at worst, it's maybe a quarter out of date.
Are you going to publish a presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And the other thing to think about inside here is that when it says coming soon, like header background is in preview right now.
Yep.
The section background, again, footer, I've started to see that in targeted release in a couple different tenants, but not in all of them. So it gives you a sense of these different pieces. Was there a question inside here?
I was just commenting that the footer was actually released into targeted and then actually pulled back. So there was some sort of an issue with it. One of my clients actually saw that issue. It wasn't rendering code. So it's temporarily gone, but I'm sure it's coming back again.
Went out and then disappeared.
Yeah. So if you were in targeted release, which this must have been in targeted release. I hope it was in targeted release. We had a bug where the footer was getting turned on by default on existing sites. And what should happen is that, yes, we want the footer to be on by default on new sites, but for existing sites, we didn't want to change the look of those sites. So that's why that footer may have shown up. And then if it was unmodified, meaning no data was added to it, then we pulled it back. If you had modified the footer, if you had added links to it, then we didn't touch it.
Cool.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's actually good context. So what you'll find inside the lookbook is a bunch of different scenarios. For each one of them, it talks to you about which of the features were used inside here. What are the specific web parts behind each one of them? So you get kind of the decomposition of the page, breaking it down as you walk through it. And I've seen that this has been really very interesting just to get people thinking about it, to think about how they break up their page between the different sections and how they can use section background colors to be able to demarcate parts of the page. As well as, what do some of the web parts look like? So if you're getting started, this is a unbelievably fantastic resource to go through. Published out, the URL is inside the deck. So really quick and easy to be able to get to. Go off and get inspired with some ideas of things that you might want to do. See, are we back in presentation mode? Everyone's happy?
Yep. Looks good.
Cool. So now we have some ideas of things we want to do. How do we go off and start planning this thing? So for me, I think of it as my first step is understanding what your current state is. What's good about it? What are the gaps? What are the things I want to change inside here? Next, rank the outcomes of those things that you're talking about. What's the most important number one thing that you want to achieve with this site or with your entire intranet? Depending, this could be something that you do for one site or for the overall intranet across the whole thing. And then start to define out what are the logical areas on the page. I think of them as zones where you might want to put resources together. So I wanted to use my example of what we did on our intranet just recently. So for My Takeda, when I put it together, on the right-hand side, you'll see our new homepage that we launched on day one of the company. And you can see it breaks down at the top. I've got the Chrome. I've got some global navigation that goes across all of the sites, and that's using a SharePoint framework extension to be able to deploy something on every site on the tenant. So every team site, every comm site, they all have that same consistent global nav and global footer as well. So those are consistently applied everywhere. Then the top of the page, we have a what I like to think of as like my corporate info zone. I've got news and ads, for lack of a better way to describe it. This is something that corporate comms wants you to click on. So they're actually using the carousel view on the news web part and some metadata on the news to be able to go do it. So I've got those kinds of sections. Next thing down was we wanted to have personalized My News being promoted inside there. So this is a SharePoint framework web part that we wrote that's actually pulling together a mix of their classic news plus their modern news. They wanted something a little bit fancier than what I could do inside highlighted content out of the box. So if you come across things where you need to be able to extend it, the capability is there. And I like this example because it shows this is 90% out of the box, but with the ability to interject custom requirements if you need to. So this is kind of the corporate resources, major links. And we broke this up into 4 different web parts because there's more in here than you can easily fit without making it hard to go navigate. So these are things that apply to all employees. These are integration resources. These are just for people who are legacy Takeda employees, just for legacy Shire employees. So we logically broke it up into 4 different instances of quick links inside that zone. But again, totally out of the box, 2 different views on the quick links web part to be able to put it together. Then we thought of the next as kind of the engagement zone. So how do we get our employees to be engaged, to talk to each other, to see what's going on within the company? On the left-hand side, we've got the Yammer web part. On the right-hand side, we've got a list of recommended Yammer groups. These are things that are very popular that you might want to check out. If you're a new employee, these might be useful for you. Then we've got some popular videos, an RSS feed with press releases, which is a web part from Patterns and Practices, and then the out-of-the-box corporate events. So, Streamer Office 365 video web part over here, events over here, and then a P&P RSS feed inside there. So going down, we've got recent documents and recent sites, and then that's kind of the bottom of the page. But if you think about kind of what are the things that you want to achieve, you say, hey, what's most important? What do I want to stack at the top? What do I want to pull down to the bottom? And then start to come up with those logical zones. I think it's a lot easier to be able to go do it. So I'm going to flip over real quick to actual live intranet and show you what that looks like. If I get the right one, but we'll just go there. I grabbed a Betty White video for one of the demo sites today because it's awesome. Betty White explaining multi-factor authentication. It's kind of amazing, right? So if I walk down here, you can see news featured. I get into the kind of personalized My News custom SharePoint framework experience where you can build any custom integrations that you want to. Kind of a larger view here that you can see of the frequently needed links, being able to kind of promote the right resources out to folks. Some Yammer information, recommended Yammer groups, my videos, press releases, and corporate events, recent documents, sites that I frequently go to, and then down at the bottom to my fat footer, kind of giving folks information about it. So, any questions kind of on that process of breaking down the pieces? Good.
Thinking about it. Any questions? Anybody?
So one question. So I'm noticing on his news, he's got looks like he's alternating dark and light, like in that second section there.
Yeah. So
you're
the
alternating
second
dark and light. How are you keeping that order? Because right now, maybe it's the update that just happened last week where you can order your news. I haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet, but my news is just coming in however it wants to come in right now.
Yeah. So let me jump back. So if I go look at it, I've got the out of the box section, which is corporate news, and then this is a custom SharePoint framework web part. So inside here, you can design any user experience that you want to do. It's one of the extensibility points. So you can decide how you want that to look. For us, we try to make it consistent, like we tried to leverage the command bar from UI Fabric to be as consistent as we can with, you'll see like that's what new looks like up there, and this is like what global IT looks like. So we try to give a nod to Dave's user interface wherever we can to keep things consistent. But we had some custom functionality where they have a preferences-driven subscription system and pulling in their old classic stuff to bridge the gap and all that kind of stuff. So gave us the ability to kind of merge old and new together, using that SharePoint framework web part. Make sense?
So do you have one? I have a question. So you're referring to the sliders in each panel, how they're all.
Just how we did that, yeah, that section you just scrolled out of, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. You're talking about the news items or the section background?
I'm trying to think, how can I do this, but I can't control the order in which
Right.
my news is coming in, because it's coming in from multiple, I got a hub, and they're coming in from multiple spokes, so I can't always control
Are you using the highlighted content part?
Oh, you're talking about controlling the order of news articles when you're pulling stuff in.
The news articles, yeah.
One of the things that you can do is you can use the highlighted content part, and that actually has a sort capability. And you can choose for the highlighted content to be news only. You can try that. It's just a different way of doing it.
I know the news web part just got that order thing that was supposed to be
Yeah.
there, but then it wasn't there, but I haven't had a chance this week to look to see what's actually there. So.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat. I saw that and I haven't experimented with it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's not in the Decatur tenant right now. Let me see if it's in this other demo tenant that I spun up earlier, because I wanted to grab a brand new tenant. Organized news is here. So yeah, this is great. So I can show you. Great.
Yeah.
That was not here 2 hours ago because I just spun it up and it had to get to targeted release. So good, I can show you this. So within the out-of-the-box news web part, I've got a couple different views or layouts that I can choose. As an example, I could do a carousel, I could do hub news, I could do, I really still like top story a lot, but the carousel is good in a bunch of different situations. But right here, you can actually grab specific articles, and you can, I like to think of them as like pin them in a specific place and say, always make sure that the first article until I edit the page is going to be Dave is presenting about communication sites today. And that's after that, just let everything flow automatically in terms of order. Is this the feature you were talking about?
Yeah, it's not sort of. So one of the things that we're doing is we've got an IT hub, and then we're feeding in with our SharePoint Center of Excellence, business apps, end user apps, all of that. And so each one of those spokes basically are feeding news up into our hub. And then, but I love that little dark light look that you're doing. It would make it so much easier to identify your news. Maybe we do a color based on the spoke that it's coming from. I don't know, I'm just not sure about my head around it.
So I get it. So the question is really about is when you're rolling up news from multiple locations. So like if I instead of saying this site, I selected a couple different sites that I wanted to roll news up from, having a way to be able to somehow differentiate visually which of the sites it came from. Yeah, what you see out of the box is you see the name of the site that it came from listed on there. So if I flip over to my live one, you will see on here, you can see who published it, and depending on the view, you'll see different information. But
there's also a feature that's rolling out now called authoritative news, where if you via PowerShell command designate a site as an authoritative news source in your organization, the news web part will recognize that, and it will badge that news article with kind of a bold tag to let people know in the news web part that is an article that is from an important source.
I'm trying to see if there's a picture of that in the lookbook.
Right there. So you can see that blue badge kind of sticking out there.
So you can see right there.
That's what the badge looks like. And you name it's the name of the site. We just highlight it because you've told us that this is important.
And that gives you kind of a nice ability to see that this news came from Women at Contosa, this one came from Enterprise Innovation. So you can see the place that it's rolling up from, which gives you a good kind of perspective on it. And then on top of it, you can have that extra badge as well. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, that answers Deb's question. We have one more question from the audience.
Awesome.
How are you handling the employee learning portal on the new custom learning thing that's coming? Is that just gonna, like, if you're building it, you just make that a link, or?
Did you get the question, Dave?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand. Are you talking about Microsoft's custom learning portal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
to me, so there's a couple different places to think about that. Until that comes out, what I have today is we have a My Takeda Help site, and I'll flip that up because we'll just use that as a proxy for this conversation, because I think it's the same outcome, the same objective behind it. So if I go down to the very bottom of my page, inside my footer, I have a link to the My Takeda Help site. So in that same way, there are other ways that I can get to it as well. I can get to it from IT. I can get to it 2 or 3 different ways. But it's just part of our information architecture to be able to send people to the right location, and get them able to get access to those resources. I think of it as any other resource inside your organization that you're wanting to go off and promote. Which one?
Yammer Embed.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that's something that's interesting that we saw. So the Yammer Embed could be any size that you want, and very often we had a very small one. The smallest one on the new Yammer Webpart is 4 conversations, which if you have a lot of photos can be very long. So just something to think about as you're planning out the space on it. Make sure you leave enough room for Yammer. It's good. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of conversation around what does it take to get engagement, and having one conversation is not super engaging, especially when the photos are all scrolled off inside a scrolling iframe. It's just something to plan for and make sure that you're aware of as you're getting going there. So let's talk about getting going. So how do I get started with these things? Pretty straightforward. So from SharePoint Home,
Sorry, I was just noting your background. Let's stick with there.
Oh, my background?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Totally good. So easy as going to SharePoint Home and saying, hey, I want to go create a communication site. Once I've done that, I can go apply some branding to the site and make it reflect my company's colors. So let's just go off and do that really quick, so we can see what that experience looks like. And in fact, I'm going to do it inside this demo tenant now that I have one that is looking good. So we'll go over to the SharePoint Home, and I'm going to go click on Create a Site. And I'm going to create a communication site, and I'm going to call this one Boston Office 365. It is available. I click on Create Site, so it's going to go off and spin up the site in the background, and in just a couple seconds, it will redirect us over to our brand new site to go set it up. Yeah, no, I think that performance is just my sharing my screen on Teams. I don't think it's reflective of anything other than that.
Yeah, I'm going to send an email.
Okay. They'll say, get Dave a new laptop, which is totally fine if you want to do that. All right. So as easy as that, we now have a brand new communication site. And you can see that is site/Boston Office 365. So that title I put in went off and created the site. At the top, I've got a hero web part. The layout gives me news, events, documents. And if I want to go change any of these, it's as easy as clicking edit. And I can go through and I can add sections just by mousing over and getting the little handle there where I can say I'm going to go add 2 columns above there, and then I can add web parts inside there. So I'm going to just do something really silly and easy, and I'll go add an image here just to give you a sense of it, and we will search for one on the web. In fact, I'm going to go grab some scenery because scenery is pretty. And on this side, we will say drinks in Alaska. That sounds good. After the demo, sponsored by. Hey, Mike, you flying everyone to Alaska? Anyway, I wanted to just kind of walk through that fastest and easiest of kind of experiences. You know, really easy to go through, add a section on here, deleting, changing, reconfiguring these, super easy, right? So if I go look at this full bleed section, inside here I've got a hero Webpart. So I just want to kind of highlight the difference. I've got properties on the section right here, where I can control things like my section background, the layout options, but I also have the Webpart itself has properties. So inside here, I can say, I want to actually do a 3-tile for this. I don't have 5 major things I want to talk about on this site. I just have a couple. And then with the individual tiles, is that the right term within the Webpart? All right, great. So the individual tiles inside here have properties, and I can go through and I can change the link for it. I can swap out the image. And again, it's nicely consistent in that if I say, let's go back here, I'm going to go to our scenery again, and we're going to grab another. It's very dramatic. Let me do that again. Teams was just in the wrong place for me. So here's some scenery. We'll grab that guy and hit go. And you see the hero is immediately updated with our new, more dramatic kind of perspective on the world. Everyone good? Any questions so far?
Any questions? Yes.
I think you started this sort of section of what you were just talking about applying a theme, like color in your branding.
Yeah.
Is that what you've just demonstrated? I think you jumped into sort of editing web parts, but was there a way to sort of apply a theme to the site?
That's exactly where I was going next.
Okay, great.
So when I go up to the gear and I click on change the look, and this is actually a new kind of tweak to this user interface. So if you're in targeted release, you would see this version of it. So I'm going to go down and say that I want this to be red instead. And you can see that does a couple things. And I can also go through and say I'm going to tweak this to be a combination of red and an accent color of gray. And maybe I changed my mind and I really wanted dark blue. So I'm kind of tweaking my theme a little bit.
Dave, are you stuck with the colors that Microsoft is offering you there, or can you give your corporate affairs the exact RGB codes that they want?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's actually my next slide. So maybe I will cut back over to slides to go answer that question. I'm just going to delete the extra section I threw at the top of here. You get the idea. I just wanted to kind of reflect it as we created the site, show how easy that was to go. I publish it. Those changes are live. So we applied an out-of-the-box theme. Kind of next step on this is exactly what you were asking. Corporate Comm says, hey, that's not the right color blue for me. So I have a custom theme that I want to go apply to it instead. So really easy to get started, aka.ms/sp theme builder, to generate a custom theme. So I'm going to go click on this guy to go open that up and drag it to the right window. Maybe I just need to escape there. There we go. All right. Are you looking at the theme builder right now?
Yes.
Awesome. So if Corporate Comms goes through and tells you that your theme color is going to be lime green and gives you a hex code of 00D40, and a lovely, let's go choose something awesome for our text. Let's go say it is going to be
Christmas.
We're going Christmas here, right? A little bit of red and green to make our body background deal. First, you should find yourself a new comms person.
I just want to say from the product group, we put the rails in place to not let this happen, but ultimately there's very little we can do.
So it's beautiful, isn't it? So that will give you a bunch of text here, right? So this is going to go through and actually define out a PowerShell variable with all of the lovely hex codes that got generated to complete this awful palette of terribleness that we've created. I'm not going to actually load it up because it's awful, but I will show you how to do it. Should you decide that that is going to be your new corporate colors. So, and again, you can do design something better at aka.ms/sp theme builder. So I recommend it. So when you go through and do this, the PowerShell is really, really simple. So you connect to SharePoint Online. You create a PowerShell variable right there with the contents of that. You saw that was all in the text box. I can just grab it. And then it's literally one line of PowerShell, add SPO theme. You give it a name. That's the identity of it. So, you know, my company number 1, my company number 2. You pass in the PowerShell variable that has that theme. And if it is a dark background, then it's inverted. If it's not, then it's not. So it's almost always inverted equals false. But really simple. And then inside the UI, let's go look at where these show up. I'll just go brand a new site that I created a little bit ago. Sites/ Boston Office 365. No. All right. I'll do it from another site. Here we go. So I just go up to the gear again, like we did last time. And I'm going to go to change the look. And inside here, when I go to theme, you can see I have 2 company themes that are defined. So I've got a red theme and I've got a gray theme. And I can toggle back and forth between those 2 different themes. So it's relatively subtle inside this design, but you can see all my links turn to red versus if I switch it over to gray, all my links turn to gray. You get the idea. If I had something that had a larger kind of block of color, you can see it more dramatically, but pretty simple. You can also go through if you want to and disable the out-of-the-box themes. There's PowerShell to be able to do that as well if your company only wants their specific theme showing and nothing else. Cool?
Great. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
One question.
It's a great question.
It seems like you need to know PowerShell to do a lot of things now, and I don't know PowerShell. I'm wondering if there are any good resources you can suggest and how difficult it is to learn.
Yes, sir. I guess it depends on what you want to do. If you're an IT professional, if you're an IT pro, an admin, then I would say PowerShell is a really useful skill to go have. The basics of it, SharePoint Saturdays usually have 1 or 2 good PowerShell intro courses. I know in the Boston area, Jason Himmelstein usually comes up and does one there. That's pretty excellent. I'd recommend it strongly, but in all honesty, it's 2 lines and you can usually copy and paste them right from the site. So in this case, I think it's pretty easy in general. If that's your role, I would recommend learning PowerShell. I think it's a pretty cool thing to know. The one tip I guess I would give you if you're going down that path is that you can open up a normal PowerShell window inside here, but you can also do PowerShell ISE. And if you do PowerShell ISE, there's IntelliSense as you start to go type through them. So it'll make it easier for you as you start to do it. So you'll type in connect dash, and then, you know, SPO service is one of your autocomplete options. So I think it makes it a lot easier if you have kind of type ahead support to be able to learn PowerShell. So that's one tip I would give you. Mike, you probably have other tips on that as well. I know you're a big PowerShell fan.
That's correct. Thank you. David Losey and I actually did a presentation together for this group that was Office 365 PowerShell awesomeness. And I'm not sure, I think we did that so long ago, it was before we were recording. but I might be wrong about that. So I'd say check our YouTube channel. That might be up there. But the deck for it is definitely available on our website. And that deck has a bunch of links and references. I know Dave and I both pulled together a whole bunch of references for how to get started on PowerShell.
Thank you.
Yep.
What admin level do you need to run that PowerShell script with themes? Any global admin or site collection admin?
I believe it is a SharePoint admin because themes are stored centrally within SharePoint. Does that sound right to you, Dave?
It's SharePoint.
It's SharePoint admin? Yeah. We have confirmation.
You don't need to be a global admin for that.
That sounds right to me because it's considered a tenant-wide setting.
Yep. And I'm just switching accounts so I can get to the other demo site. I'm going to show you while you guys are asking any other questions about it.
Here's a question. Can you globally replace the lovely letter that shows up in that top left-hand corner with a consistent company logo? I keep having to do it manually. See that B?
Great feature request. I like that.
That B came up because
I know, my boss does not want that letter there.
Site logo. Is there a way to change the default site logo from a letter to a corporate logo?
Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. I actually like that a lot. I've never thought about that, but you're right. That's something that would be sort of like people used to do that in master pages, right?
I would caution a little bit though, because if you look at the way we use site logos, and the reason we generate a color in a letter is because in certain screen sizes, when you have a list of sites, that logo is a very good visual reference to differentiate between sites. So as soon as you make that consistently the same across all sites, you make it hard for people to scroll through a list of things and pick out one that they're familiar with.
The other thing that's interesting, right, is that logo points to the root of the site, not the root of the intranet. So if you've turned on your suite bar branding, and I want to go use a different account here and just log in as developer, fantastic. Now I'll have rights to the demo account that I created for you guys earlier today. So the suite bar branding, just to kind of talk about it. So in the admin center, under company profile, I believe is the name of the text, you can set a logo that shows up on your suite bar. So that will pop up here in just a second, maybe, or maybe not. But you can have a logo that shows up in that location. So right about here, that brings you to your intranet homepage. So that's going to consistently bring you back there wherever you are, as opposed to this logo that's going to bring you to the top of that particular site that you're on. So if I'm on a site that's about Microsoft Teams or a site that's about our brand or things like that, having a different logo for those might not be a terrible idea. Something to think about.
I agree.
Always.
We have one other question here.
Yeah, sure.
This may not be for this session, but something odd has happened in our environment. Last week, all my communication sites, the modern communication sites, were all blue too, and then all our new recent ones are purple. So we're like, did they convert to a hub? Like, what happened?
Your theme changed across all of your sites?
No, and I'm wondering if that is it, if I should start to look there.
Yeah, it's probably the default.
Are you saying that all new sites are purple, or that
All the
existing?
new ones are okay. Yeah, the older ones are okay. The newly provisioned ones are not. They're all like purple hue after telling everybody, oh, if they're blue, they're communication sites, or if they're magenta, they're office group sites. And I was like, oh.
Oh, like the default theme was changed, it sounds like.
Yeah, the default theme should be the same across all of those sites. And you can change that centrally.
Someone must have changed it.
Yeah, I think someone must have changed it.
All right, we'll look into it in the morning then.
And this is a good example of what we're talking about, right? So if I want to get back to the root of my intranet, I click on the logo on the suite bar. If I want to get back to the root of the Boston Office 365 comp site, then I would click on the Boston Office 365 comp site. So you get the idea. This is maximum time till beer. This is actually leveraging one of the new web parts that shipped recently, which is a countdown timer. I figured having a time till beer counter at the top of the site was a reasonable choice. Awesome. So I want to make sure that I can beat my countdown timer. That's kind of like the little time bomb at the end. So I'm gonna keep going unless you guys have other questions.
Any other questions? I think we're good on questions in the room here.
Awesome. So I want to talk briefly about hub sites, and of course I have to sneak in pictures of my kids because that's what I do. Two different perspectives on hub sites. Most folks in the room know what a hub site is, or no?
Yep. Yeah. Getting a lot of head shakes.
Awesome. Great. So on the left-hand side, no? I'll make sure I hit it real quick, right? Because I think it's an important part of the story. So up here across the top, you have. What was that?
We need some hugs.
Can we connect one hub to another? Oh, yeah.
When you're trying to do an intranet and you can't connect hubs, it's useless.
When you're trying to do intranet and you can't do what with a hub?
You can't connect your hubs. You wind up with a siloed intranet, which is useless.
Oh, because you want to create hubs. You want to connect one hub to a different hub.
Right. Well, my hubs are hubbing spokes, which are my team sites. But I need to connect my hubs to my main intranet site. So I need
your main intranet is classic still. Is that right? Your main intranet is still classic?
No, we started from modern.
Okay.
Started from scratch.
So how many hub sites do you have?
I'm still building them. I don't know the deal here. I think 8 now.
Okay, so that's a fairly manageable number. What we've seen a lot of people do successfully is, frankly, just manually curate the other hubs into the hub nav. Like hub nav is auto-generated, but you can also manually curate it.
That's what I'm doing.
And
That's
so
exactly what I'm doing.
So with 8 of them, like you can just connect them yourself. And with all the web parts, like yes, we have hub scoped web parts that know to query across a hub, but you could also just tell those web parts to roll up from specific sites so that you could get data from lots of hubs as well if that's what you wanted.
Well, the challenge we're having is we want a consistent look and feel with the top nav, and we literally have to go in and manually do that everywhere. So I've got my business sites, which are my hubs, and I've got my department sites, which are sort of teams, so people can find a way to get there. And we're dealing with, like I said, 8 hubs and then another 15 department sites, and I'm at 75 site collections right now. And it's going to explode because we've got external collaborations we've got to set up. Now that we've got to set up a new site collection for everything, instead of doing sub-sites, it's a nightmare, and nothing communicates with anything. It's just, it's a challenge.
So just to take a step back and make sure everyone in the room is kind of on the same page with what a hub site is and why you would use them, right? So a hub is a family of sites, hence the kind of picture of the family on the right-hand side. They generally have things in common. So things that they have in common is the hub navigation that you were just talking about going across the top of the screen. So that's an extra layer of nav separate from the site. It relates the family together. So if I think about like IT in my world, so we have a hub for IT, and then within there I might have one for getting help and help resources that includes help desk and frequently asked questions and Yammer communities and stuff like that, as well as how do I get to the Office 365 or the Microsoft custom learning site. All of those would be off of that help site. I might have one for R&D IT. I might have one for the manufacturing IT group. I might have one for the shared services kind of group. So each of those major organizations all have separate comm sites, There's also another property for, IT for IT. It's how does the CIO communicate out to the few hundred people who work for him and be able to align that organization. So almost like a mini intranet targeted toward that group. So for that reason, IT is a hub, and all of those sites have the same consistent family nav that goes across it. It's really the IT nav going there. Also, as part of that, your search is now going to, by default, scope out to go across all of those sites. So if I want to do a search in IT and I type in SharePoint, I'm going to get hits back from our help site or from the custom learning site that's part of it, or from any of those resources that are connected to it. When I look at news, our comms person has the option to be able to automatically roll up news from all of the sites. If I am too vocal, she may choose to exclude me from that roll up and say, hey, Dave posts too many articles on new features in SharePoint Online. We don't need him on the IT Hub site. People can go to his site if they want to go learn about that. So you've got some flexibility there, but you can do an automatic roll up from all of the sites or from a subset of those sites. Oops. If I go down, events, also the ability to roll up across those. And then my top sites Webpart, I can get a icon for each of the sites inside there, or again, a subset of them, if you want to be able to take that approach. Is that helpful for folks to sort of level set on what hub sites do?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. I want to also take just 2 seconds to say what they aren't. So in an intranet of any real size, they aren't global navigation. And my friend Dave has heard me say, hey, global nav is really important for a long time. And I'm positive that they will get there, and that it's a common enough ask that that at some point there will probably be a global navigation built into SharePoint. So today, the way that this works, and I'll show you on mine, is that I have this. Let me X out of presentation mode. There we go. All right, can you see my screen again? Yes? Wonderful. So this is my global navigation. This exists across everything. And it's a terrible information architecture that I finally have convinced corporate comms to change in a couple months. So we're starting down that path. But with the news services, they've got some employee stuff, and then a long scrolly about Takeda thing, and then help preferences and useful links. That was their information architecture they had before. They didn't want to change it for day one. So we kept it exactly as is. But every single site across SharePoint has that same consistent global navigation. Below that, if this was part of a hub, you would see the hub nav that says, here's how I navigate across the family. Here's how I get to my uncles, cousins, nephews, and nieces and find the right resources, whatever makes sense to be able to promote. And it is really important to know it's not just a site, it's any link that you want to piece in there. So think logically as you're putting this together, what are the right resources that people are looking for when they go to IT, whether they happen to land on the page that has all the phone numbers globally for the help desk, or whether they're going to the services page, what are the things they want to hop back and forth between? And then below that, I actually get to my site nav. So this is, I think someone called out that the new mega menu had shipped earlier this week and shown up for a lot of folks. So I wanted to go through, and it takes a couple seconds to set it up, because you have 3 levels of navigation really to design a good mega menu. So you've got your top one where it says speakers, and then you've got a heading inside there for 2019 and one for 2018. And then you have the actual links inside there as well.
And I just want to call out, this is one thing that we put in based on feedback, which is people wanted headings in navigation that didn't have to be clickable links. And so when we ship the mega menu, you can see that the bolded headings that Dave has there, those aren't links. They're just text-only headings, and that's an option that you can set within that menu.
And this is new, right? Like this has shipped out, within the past week to folks. Best practices are still being created. I think what I'm finding personally is if you have 2 levels of navigation, turn off mega menu. Don't do mega menu with 2 levels of nav, because it won't look good. If you have 3 levels and you want to organize it this way, that's really the way to enable a great experience inside mega menu. So, the alternate for folks who haven't seen this before, I'll just flip it back. If I go to change the look, navigation, it's as easy as toggling between mega menu and cascading menu. Hit save, refresh my page. I think it goes that fast. I haven't tried it. I shouldn't have. Okay. I always like to be careful. And there you go. So now you can see not as good of an experience for a 3-level nav. But if all I was doing was speakers going down to links to them by name, that might have been okay. If I wanted to do it this way, though, I want to categorize it. You can see how the mega menu can be hugely valuable to make that a much easier experience. I can also toggle my header at the top between what you're maybe more familiar with, this larger sort of standard layout and the compact layout. And this is the logo we were talking about before, where you've got the ability to go through and set what the logo is for this particular site. And that logo is going to bring me back to the root of this site.
Notably also, and this is a small thing, but it matters, not all logos are square. And in modern SharePoint before, we all had to be square. And that's not true now. So you can have a non-square logo in that spot.
We did not crush the logo.
Did not.
Yeah, no, it looks nice.
And
if I want to, I can even go through and make poor choices, like.
The strong emphasis looks good, I think.
You like that?
I love the strong emphasis. Yeah.
Maybe it's in combination with the light green background there that I'm the artistic choice. It's not that I don't like strong emphasis. It's just that artistic choice. I don't know. I'll leave it. It's fine. So, any other questions, kind of about menus?
I've got a question for you about menus. For the mega menu, is that available for hub navigation and modern site navigation, or is it just one?
Both.
Both. Okay. And somebody else had a question.
This is not necessarily just the menus, but is there any setting or code or something to change the text size for people that want to be able to, sometimes on commercial websites, they have changing the whole text size.
Yes, so because it responds automatically based on the size of your browser, it's going to automatically optimize itself for that. But if you do have trouble reading it, like what I've seen works pretty well is just zooming your browser. So if that was a little bit too small coming across, you can see I just moved up to 110. And because they're handling the responsive layout of it, everything kind of continues to work pretty well. And if I wanted to go the opposite direction and kind of scale things down, you can see, and I think maybe it's worth showing if I just open up the developer tools super quick and we flip it over to my device toolbar. You can see that on an iPhone X, if I were not in the SharePoint mobile app, this is what it would look like. And it will nicely optimize itself for that particular thing. And then maybe I'll just shift up to an iPad. And at an iPad level, it would look like this. iPad Pro, you get the idea. So you're able to see how the user interface responds as you scale up. Useful tool, if you guys haven't seen that before, is that little device toolbar inside here is a useful way to be able to go after and see all those. Awesome. So those are kind of the major pieces of this. I was going to go through, I think my last slide that I have on here was really a, let's go pop it open, take a look at this site and maybe play with some of the pieces of it, show you how some of those work, because there's a couple features that I think are really neat. You can see we've got the countdown timer at the top, and I'll just show you what that looks like. That's actually a custom image that I put behind it. So really simple. I've got I go pop open my properties. I chose a time and I said I should be off stage by 8 p.m. Eastern time. that sounds good. Go count down until that. If I wanted to have a button at the bottom, I could turn on that button that said, tell us to go home, which, could go off and link to maybe a Microsoft forum that said, what did you think of our event? Things like that. And again, you can see, let me turn off the call to action link. You can see the background image that I chose to put inside there, and you can control the opacity of it for, exactly the effect that you are, looking for inside here, and then choose, is it going to be a dark overlay, a light overlay, whatever artistic effect you are looking for on there. So pretty neat when you have an event like this and you're either counting up or counting down, can fit in lots of different places. We looked at news before, something I want to maybe just flip to real quick. I just took a couple of our recent events, and I'll just say I'm going to go show 2 items inside our news carousel. And now I've got a carousel that can go navigate back and forth between our different sessions. And one of the things that I did in here that's worth talking about, so for my session, Design and Build Your Modern Intranet with Communication Sites, I actually made a page. And I said, here's some stuff that I might want to go talk about as part of it, some features inside here. And I brought back some other recent pages that have been modified on that site just to show the kind of concept of how easy it is to go through and create these things. But the other one, the second article, which was last month's presentation, if you look at it, is actually a link that goes off to Boston O365usergroup.com. So when I go and click on this guy, that news article is going to open in a new window so I don't lose my context and bring me directly over to the page on the website that has information about that. So to create one of those is really easy. When I go add this, I can either add a news post, that's a page that lives here, or a news link, which is just a URL that lives somewhere else and will redirect you off to that particular location. Good. Added in a little YouTube player. So if we wanted to, we could go through and we could play last month's presentation right here. I should have chosen the PowerShell one. You get the idea. I wanted to also show some internal stuff. So here we have Betty White from World Password Day playing out of stream.
I'm sure you can tell by my getup.
Now you might not be able to hear my audio, so I'm going to go turn on closed captions on here.
I'm also quite
And we'll see what happens if I go maximize this guy. Oh, my computer's protesting. Yes, it is. All right. So you can see inside here the actual text of this. So Stream went through when I uploaded this video. I had grabbed a copy of Betty White talking. Let's mute this guy. So I had grabbed a video of Betty White for World Password Day, did a absolutely hilarious video on multi-factor auth, and it kept disappearing off YouTube. So when I found a copy of it, I downloaded that locally, and when I uploaded it to Stream, you can see it actually extracted all of the text automatically. So I can see that even though we're kind of having a conversation and playing, it can fit right there with that Stream's automatically extracted text being shown as a closed caption here. So kind of a cool feature of that Webpart. Here you've got a featured resources section, and inside here we have section background colors. That was something else I wanted to show off because it's something that's new and I think makes it an easy experience. So when I pop open my properties, I can control, and this is the exact same thing that you saw earlier, where I can choose what my sections are going to go look like. Sorry, I'm clicking too fast for myself. So I can choose between 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, 1/3 right. You get the idea. Super easy to go change those. But then I can also change the background of it and say, hey, I like the blue tinted version of this as well.
Go with strong.
You want to go?
I love
strong.
Oh, but your icons.
My icon choices are not well suited to strong, are they?
No.
Yeah, it's interesting. You get the idea. They're pretty easy to go through and configure these. For me, I find that this breaks up the page really nicely. So if you have a longer page with more resources on it, it's a good thing to consider. Some of the web parts are still learning about section background colors. So just if you get one that doesn't look like it does a great job with it so far, know that it will eventually. It will probably in the near future. So like the new Yammer web part, as an example, you'll see if that web part doesn't know about background colors yet, then it will put a white background just so that it doesn't look bad. They've handled it kind of from a safety perspective. But I think about that when I'm planning out the different zones on my page and what I want to put where. Try to make sure that the web parts that do a great job with section background colors are the ones that land there at the time, or choose one of the settler effects. And I think that still looks fine with the white, but I would avoid the strong behind Yammer today. I'm sure that'll change within weeks. You get the idea. So another quick links web part next to it. And again, super easy to go configure a variety of different look and feels on these that you might like. So I came up with a couple samples that maybe this user group might like the send to mail at Yammer or the Teams champions, and just to give some ideas behind it.
One thing that I think is great to show is the icon library.
That's a great call, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask for that too.
Cool. So it's a very good point. So if I go into the icons, I can pop up a gallery of all of these, and it's I actually did this where I said, hey, I want to go look for a question and take a look at my options and say, hey, this survey question is a good choice for me. I think it's just Teams slowing me down a little bit, but I'm going to go with that survey questions. We'll select that one. You get the idea. It's really easy to change those. The other thing that's also, I think, equally important is that you can choose a custom image for it instead of a glyph if that's a better fit for you. So I think I grabbed the Boston Office 365 logo and threw it on my desktop earlier. Or I put it in my down. I think we're going to put Michael in here as a, he was convenient. So you get the idea. Places where I think that's really useful is when I'm linking to Concur and WebEx and Teams or something that has Salesforce, a great example. So for any of the external tools that we end up linking to that have a logo, if your company recognizes that logo, super valuable to not choose an icon in that case and choose a photo instead. I probably wouldn't put Michael on the Yammer one since he did a thing on teamwork, but you get the idea. So that easy. Sure.
A lesson learned the hard way, that icon must be square.
Yes, this is
It has
true.
to be exactly square, otherwise it gets totally messed up on you.
Yes. Yep, absolutely right. That's a good thing. Thanks for sharing that. Other thing that I would say is at the bottom of the page, you have a choice between turning comments on or off. For the homepage of my intranet, best practice that I have found is you turn it off there. For news articles, I almost always turn it on. There's been a lot of work done around alerting people when comments come in. So I'll see inside the SharePoint mobile app on my phone when someone comments on a news post. I don't think I would want that level of interaction with people on the homepage. I would rather put a Yammer group on there and let them interact with each other rather than have it all kind of coming back to me. And I think that's really the kind of the set of content I wanted to walk through. And maybe we can answer any questions for you guys.
Yes.
If you don't have the whole architecture laid out, because you have lots of sites that don't quite have time to help you with that yet, is there any downside to picking one that does have time and just getting them up as a communication site? If I later have to hook it up to a hub site that I'm going to build later, is there any downside to just picking one and working completely on that?
there's no downside. You can associate a site with a hub, and then 30 seconds later associate it with a different hub, and it would inherit all the theming. Its queries would change. Like, it's a very fluid system. So you're not backed into a corner.
Yeah, the one comment I would make is start with one that you know. That's like in both of these environments, the first site we built was the Office 365 help site because it was our team that was responsible for the content, and that let the team get their legs up under them and start to create the help content that we needed for our users to be able to train them and be able to communicate best practices. So that's the one I've started with twice now, and it's worked out well. But you could start anywhere.
Yeah, and that question gets to one of the primary purposes of hubs and the way that we built them. With subsites, has anyone tried to move a subsite between site collections? That's not an easy process. Yeah. It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of fix up. There's a lot of extraction and re-importing to do. And that doesn't reflect the way organizations work today, right? Reorgs happen. Mergers and acquisitions happen. So the workplace is much more fluid today. And so we needed to build a system where the fact that a hub had an associated site or a site was associated with a particular hub was simply a property that you could change, and you could change easily. And you could move your intranet to reflect whatever organization that you needed at the time. And so that's why we built it to be so fluid, and why it's so different from the hubs from the sub-site model.
I was showing Dave before we started. I've got one site collection in Takeda called orgs that has 1,000 subsites in it. So within orgs, you get to IT. Within IT, you get to global user experience. Within global user experience, you get to Office 365, then SharePoint. Then it's terrible because there's not a good way to break it apart.
But with hubs and associated sites, you can move those around however you felt like.
I would also elaborate that one step further. You can also change your mind about a site being a hub or not. You can make it a hub and then unregister it as a hub. So even that is flexible, which is great. Jim.
Yeah, hey, David, I got one comment because I've been looking at this a lot. The one thing to remember, never to forget, is remove the site from the hub before you delete it, or it may live longer than you do.
Remove the site
Yeah,
from the hub.
if you're a hub site or a member of it, remove it first before you delete it.
Okay.
They get stuck and they
You
stay there.
unhub it before you can delete it? If it's a hub site you want to delete it, you got to unhub it?
If you're joining a hub site and then you decide to delete it, and you don't remove it from the hub, it may live longer than you do.
So I think a team site connected to the hub. You got to disconnect it from the hub before I can delete the team site. That's most likely what you're going to do, especially if you're using Teams.
Well,
Because if you do a team for 90 days or 6 months, and you connect that team site to a hub, and then you decide to get rid of that team.
I actually have an inactive hub, so I join everything to an inactive hub, and then I have a script that goes through the different read only.
Interesting.
And then we turn everything to read, so
Then
it has the color theme, that people can search it. We even just emote it in the search engine
I
as
like that
well.
idea.
So that way you can just pull something off for a while.
I like that idea. So where you archive your teams.
We archive it, yeah, for a
I'm
while.
trying to write governance for this stuff, so I'm trying to, that's a good idea.
I do hubs as active and inactive hubs.
Sorry, yeah.
So when we're going to demote it, we just move it to a different hub as part of that process.
yeah, that's a good idea. But if you're in a,
You can have a separate hub for external sites too. You can separate your internal versus your external accessible sites as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm just starting a plan for external sites. So I've got my supply chain group, which literally is 2 people trying to plan for the future. So I've got their team site for their internal team. I've got a hub set up, a communication site set up for the hub. And then they want at least 6 external sites to start with, each one for a separate vendor. They don't want this vendor to know about that vendor.
Right.
So I'm trying to plan this out and figure that out. So you're saying you do an external hub rather than do that department hub and let that department then...
Well, if you want people to know that this site is externally accessible,
I'm going to use that URL.
Color themes, great. And then you can also have ext on the URL as well.
That's what I'm gonna do. I'm using X in the URL, try to keep my
And the
URL.
hub, giving them all a certain color, a certain theme to help.
Yeah. That's what I do too.
Couple of questions here in the room. Go ahead, Jim.
Good. I mean, in our environment, we're doing deaths, so we're killing them,
Very rapidly.
and people have deleted them without, disconnecting them. And it's real hard to get rid of them.
Really? That hasn't been my experience. I haven't seen that, so I'd like to hear more about that.
You
We
know,
can talk
action
afterwards.
policy or something, or?
I can give it a try.
We have a couple of questions here in the room.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
I have a really basic question. So I want my site, is there a way to connect a communication site to my team? Or does it have to be a team site?
In what way do you want?
So I want, so my department, I've created a team, and that's where we're doing all of our collaboration, communication. And I want to create sort of a SharePoint site that corresponds to that. But I just want them to be able to get there easily from within the team environment.
So the actual connection that happens, if people are using the Teams team and they put files in the Files tab, it will go to the team site that's automatically provisioned as part of that Teams team. And there's no way to swap that connection to a communication site today. Now, what you could do is, if you really didn't want to use that, you could embed the SharePoint, the communication site, as a tab, like the home page or the document library page or whichever page that you want, as a tab in the Teams team, and people would be able to easily get to it. We do that sometimes here, actually, when we were just actually playing around with it. So it's possible, but there's no way to sever the actual connection between the Teams team and the team site that's automatically created for it.
Is that your question, or were you just asking how do I get people over to the public side of my organization that lives in the home site?
You answered, I guess, two parts of the same question. So the first one was, can I embed the team site within Teams? So it sounded like yes. And then the second one, which I didn't ask about, but was another thing that I did have a question about, was about the file, the actual connection, so that the drive on the communication site versus the drive, the files on the team site. So that's clear that you can't sync them up to be one drive. They're two separate files or drives.
Yeah, they're two sites. I think of them as being the place where my team does the planning and gets the work done. So we put together if we're talking about today as an example, we put together the slides, we put together the deck, the demos, we plan it all in a OneNote. We say, here's what we're going to go present. And then there's the being on stage and putting together that presentation. That comm site is that external side of it. So I look at them as two different properties with two different audiences. There's the place that you get the work done, and there's the place where you are presenting that work out and other people are going to find the final product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Cool.
Is there any way, let's say you have 100 project sites, team sites. Is there any way to get them to a Webpart that automatically generates the links? Or I got to go into that damn back end with the site collections and do something there?
If they're all a member of a hub, then that hub can aggregate that data and you can show a Webpart that says show connected sites.
Okay.
Another option,
the link?
if you provision a classic enterprise search center site, you can add a search Webpart that is styled in a way to show you all of the sites that you have access to.
It's ugliest and.
Yeah. Well, you can format it using the display templates. So you can have it be tiled, you can have it be a long list of table. We can talk after I can show you an example.
But there is a connected site.
You're correct that it's ugliest by default, but it can be cleaned up and made very nice.
Yes, you know how to do it. If you don't, you gotta live with the
But every time I hear somebody say, use the classic this, I go, when does that go away? So I'm trying to be modern. I'm trying not to use it as classic because I don't want to have to redo it.
Yeah.
I don't want my client to have to pay more money to either my company or another company to have to redo it. Most like another company doesn't exist often as the first time.
And that's a great point. So if you are building a search experience, there's a really fantastic web part that's in Patterns and Practices that you can just download and drop in your app store, which gives you the same functionality as the classic search that you can use on a modern page. So that's something it's worth checking out. A couple folks worked on it. I think Mikkel Svensson started it.
Did you provide more information about that?
Yep,
Everybody's face just lit up.
Fantastic. PNP, SharePoint, search. And in fact, last month there was a really good presentation that's on YouTube for that particular web part. Search, I'm going to say web part.
So when we use SharePoint PNP web parts, when Microsoft does upgrades, there is no impact to us for customers?
Yeah, that's the other question.
I'm just afraid of using them.
Modern search. And this is the guy right. This is the guy right here. It is called Modern Search. It's under SP Dev Solutions. It is. Let me see if I can. I don't spend a lot of time in GitHub, but if you look right here, there's a nice animated flow of what this looks like. So you can see, you can go through and you can, there are different layouts on it. You can even do a handlebars kind of custom layout for what your search results are going to go look like. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. To me, I would do this over going back to a classic search center, 10 times in a row. It's got refiners, it's got just about anything that you could do inside the classic side. Someone put a whole lot of work into making this thing come together. And there is a very nice demo that was on PNP last month that walks through this. It would actually be a good topic for a session at some point.
Yeah.
So if you were to deploy PNP web parts, when Microsoft does upgrades at their backend, let's say in a year or 2 years from now, they are not going to break these web parts, right? Because they are not Microsoft, they are PNP. They are beautiful. I do deploy them in my dev environments, but not in prod.
So the beauty of open source is that it's community supported, so you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
The downside is that it's community supported, so you're not paying to be efficient.
Because that's part of fantastic for sure.
The PNP community is amazing.
Sorry, to be fair, we actually have members of the SharePoint product team managing the PNP community. Vesa Juvonen is a fantastic, community lead, I guess I would call him. He's on our product team, but he's a community lead for PNP. And, he makes sure that people are developing things that are supported and that are following our best patterns and practices. And, that's why the community exists. And we're aware of it. We know that people use these things. We try our hardest not to break these components. Sometimes that happens, but typically what will happen is that Vesa and I, for example, will talk and say, hey, we're making this change. It's going to impact the community. We give the community a heads up. And then if it's a heavily used component, then the person or the people responsible for that will release the APIs ahead of time so that they can go and fix it before we actually roll out that breaking change. So we try to work ahead of it. But I mean, this is open source, right? This happens everywhere. It leads the product. So before we have a web part that can do these things, the community is a great resource to go. And it's not like we develop in a vacuum. We are very aware of what the community is doing.
What I would say is that if you use this web part, which I do personally, keep it up to date. It doesn't need to be every month, but at least 4 times a year. Put something on your calendar that says, go check and see if there's been a major revision of it. Because as Dave said, things do change and it updates and the community does a really good job of supporting it, but it is on you to update this web part. Microsoft isn't going to automatically pull the latest version from PNP for you. So that's kind of your side of the responsibility with using open source, is make sure that you're using a relatively recent version of it. And if you have a problem, first thing to do is go check and say, hey, do I have the current rev? Yep. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, several other questions.
I have a couple questions about the events web part. So how do you get rid of the default events that show up when your events expire? And also, is this a SharePoint calendar, a classic SharePoint calendar? And how come we can't display it as a calendar?
It is the classic SharePoint events list. It's not the classic SharePoint events calendar, but the list backing them.
Actually, it's the same content type as a SharePoint calendar. And if you open up that list as a list, you see the old-fashioned calendar view with the classic ribbon, which I find really interesting.
You do, but we don't.
What I learned is
We don't respect everything that you can set via that.
In the web part, yeah.
In the web part, so you can see like we're only exposing very specific fields.
One thing I would say is for events, if you guys can put the location to be like rooms or calendars, it would be fantastic. Because the where part doesn't actually integrate with like your Exchange rooms.
Right.
Well,
that's what I was going to say. Some integration with Exchange would be fantastic.
Well,
There
where
is a
columns
web part
that
that-
taking new columns. The other day by accident. Oh, location.
One thing I did want to answer the other part of that question though. So you can see that Dave has no events here on his site, and so he's seeing placeholder events. Well, I should go back one.
Yeah.
What Dave sees here is different than what someone with view-only access to the site would see. So So we're trying. This is a design decision, and fair game to critique it. But what we're trying to do is show Dave what his site would look like if that part were populated with data. But as soon as someone comes in who doesn't have access to create an event, we collapse that down into one little thing that says upcoming events will appear here, and it's only one of those.
And what I do typically is I try to make sure I've got at least one event that's pretty far out. So I don't, in production on the homepage of the intranet, there's at least something that's months out so that if a couple of things expire, I've got a background safety net so that my users are still getting content. Just something to think about.
Yeah, we do that, but I don't know. If you forget.
Do you have an account? We have a Bugs Bunny and an Elmer Fudd account. So I can log in as Bugs Bunny or as Elmer Fudd, and I could be a member or I could be a visitor, and I can see their experience.
I do that, but I guess I never noticed that. I didn't expect that usability. Like I thought I would see what everyone would see. It would just say there are no upcoming events.
Oh, no, your view as a site owner is very different. I mean, you've got edit buttons all over the place.
In modern.
And in modern.
In the classic, it wasn't like that, right? In classic, it was kind of solid.
Well, it's a lesser degree, but it's always been customers choose who's viewing.
I know you can't do that new, I get that, but I didn't realize that the whole body of it would be different, like the actual event that I see.
Yeah.
I get that. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Other questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is there any plans to add creation of a SharePoint site as a trigger and flow?
Not at this time, I would say. That's an interesting idea.
So what you can do today you can actually have a site script that triggers a flow.
A site,
So for a given site design, so if I go to SharePoint Home, I can, and it's interesting because I didn't talk about site designs. I figured that was a little bit more of an advanced topic. When I go to create site, and I say, hey, I want to go create a comms site inside here, I have a couple different choices, these designs. So you can see topic showcase blank. You can add your own to this. So if I wanted to create something that was a organization homepage, I can create a script or a design that says what that's going to go look like. And one of the things you can do is you can trigger a flow from there. So for a given type of it, you can, but there's not currently a generic every time all sites are created.
I understood the question a little differently. I thought the question was, can flow trigger site creation?
That's a good question.
Is that?
No.
No.
It was.
The question was, can a flow be triggered by the provisioning of a new?
I misunderstood too. I
see. Right. So you would do it the way Dave described, where you have a site script that then goes and triggers flow, which I think would probably let you accomplish what you want to accomplish. But you can tell me if I'm wrong.
So what you could probably do is, in our case, like you can create a request portal for creating sites, and whenever a new site is created, you can actually put an entry in your list that a new site is created, and create a flow on top of it, saying that whenever a new item is created in the list, trigger a flow.
Yeah, that's the workaround that I immediately thought of when you asked the question as well.
Cool. Any other questions?
Well, I guess another comment. I was doing a lot of site designs, and then they released the PNP provisioning stuff. I switched to that because you do just about everything.
Yeah.
I could put a whole site out there with list, library, everything with.
Yeah, PNP site provisioning is very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a question?
Yeah, I'm working on the document library right now, and we are trying to revamp all of our HR content and create a workflow. And I'm just wondering if there are any good SEO tips that you guys would recommend specifically for SharePoint in terms of best practices for document management or naming conventions or anything like that.
For your internal search engine? Or
yeah, so we have,
SharePoint?
we're using SharePoint Server 2016 right now. We are eventually rolling out Office 365. And we have an HR portal, which leads to the back end, which is the document library, and I'm revamping both of them right now. So we're trying to streamline the process of when somebody wants to go in and update a piece of content or add something. So we're working with a developer, and I'm brand new to the organization, so just kind of trying to get things moving. But I guess just some general search tips for enhancing SEO would be great. I know general best practices, but anything specific to SharePoint or...
By SEO, though, you mean for internal people to find the new documentation.
Yeah, so we get
created.
Quite a few requests. We're trying to streamline. We have like a support center, and we want it to be very, very easy for everyone on the team to just find the content they need and share it.
So have you spent any time looking at like refiners and things like that and content types inside a search center? I don't know what you guys have built up so far.
So I don't know too much because it's my 4th week on the job. I used to work with Giant software, so it was a lot different. So I'm kind of learning that a lot of what I learned is, transferable to SharePoint, but I'm still very new to SharePoint. I know that we're working on a workflow for content. Actually, another question I had was I would really love to just dig into the different web parts and get familiar with all of them. And is there a good resource that you could suggest, like a tutorial or anything like that?
You can start with the lookbook.
Modern web parts overview documents.
Yeah, just so I can learn all the out-of-the-box functionality.
The thing is with modern, there aren't as many workbooks anymore. It literally is show this, show that, show this, show that.
Within Office 365.
Yeah, in modern now.
Yeah, modern.
It's show my library. So you create your view. How do I want to view, show my content? So use your views, use your metadata to create your view to show the content you want to show. So that's part of your planning. Show a video. It's show the frustration I'm having right now is it's text only. I can't do text and pictures. So I actually have to. Yeah, you can't. The text one, there's no pictures. So if I want to show text and pictures, like I had a couple of things I was creating that I was doing some nice little Zoom. As soon as I use a Zoom room, I actually had to publish that as a a document or an HTML document, and then use that web part to show that. So some of it's trial and error. This doesn't work, this does work, but it's really easy now compared to what it used to be.
So is there Laura Rogers did a video on the modern web ports?
Okay.
Or are you?
So you're into 2016 on premises.
And I'm wondering,
That's
too, I don't
a little different. Minutes after.
Yeah.
Yours versus moving to So how soon are you moving to, how soon are you moving to Office 365?
That I need to figure out. I just met with IT.
Because that's like, how much energy do you want to spend learning the old web part?
Exactly.
When you're
they're
moving to
gonna
this
pull
new
in.
modern design.
And I think that now, so Anya also works with me. She's designing a site right now. It looks much more modern. It's a team site, but it's not live. So I'm thinking maybe I should just be designing a team site.
And then here's the problem I had, where I came in December to this company, and my partner was Ron, he was already there a month before me. And somebody, they had an intern actually spun up SharePoint Office 365 and built some team sites. So we started designing everything because I hadn't used a communication site because I come from literally 2010, moving things from 2010 to Office 365 Classic last summer. And I hadn't done a whole lot of work with SharePoint. So I really hadn't kept up on communication sites. So my original architecture was team site, team site, team site, team site, team site. And then I went to go test permissions and went, because you can't touch anything on permissions. Everything is edit, which means everybody can create lists and libraries, which you don't want, especially if you're doing confidential information in that site, which a lot of departments have. And the only way to give somebody access to the home page is to give them access to the site. It's a framework now. We used to be able to give them access to the site pages, no more. On a team site, you have to give them access to the whole site, which means if you want to make anything confidential, you got to break permissions and remove groups. Because you can't do that at the site level in a team site.
So
Canada
to be
communication.
clear, that's why we're talking about communication sites, and that's what this is about.
Right, and I didn't understand
You're
that.
right about Teams, but that's why you want to roll out things like an intranet.
Yeah.
You definitely never want to use team sites.
No, you do not.
So the
Right.
loop comes around,
Want to use
Yeah.
communication sites are not available in 2016 on-prem yet. You have modern team sites. We'll talk a little bit more offline, but I don't want to derail the
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Dave. Are there any other questions?
When are we going to be able to
Come to the SharePoint after.
turn the root site into a communication site?
Excellent question. David, do you have an answer for us on that?
You know, I would have said it's because we lost this 365 3 years ago, we're still classic.
I know. What's going to happen when you get, I don't know.
David, are you there?
He was muted.
Muted, how about you?
David, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I was sorry about that. Can you hear me better now?
All right. So I don't know if you heard, but the question here was, when can we change our root site to modern site?
So I know that I created a new site today, and on a brand new tenant, that was actually a surprise for
We
me.
can barely hear you, David.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I created a new site today, and the new site I created today actually had a communication site in the root today. I know I've seen the documentation as to what PowerShell is going to be in terms of that upgrade process. I don't know in terms of timing for when that's coming. I mean, typically I look for announcements at SPC and Ignite because those are the two times that things usually happen. Those are my big dates for when I look for major roadmap updates.
And I can't say exactly when it's coming, but we are working on it. So stay tuned.
So yeah, we'll watch it SPC and Ignite basically.
Yeah, and I could have sworn that I saw an announcement out there at one point when I was browsing the interwebs, but then when I came back to actually implement it and find it again, I couldn't find it.
Yeah, because we're still at the old classic site and then like flip it to a communication site.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
So the one thing I'm going with communication sites though, is that you basically have a document library and you have a list. And then there's very little else to do. But what you can do is, if I take my list and I change my content type to task, or change my content type to event, I then get the old classic looking kind of a But I don't get all the functionality like a task. We like to use task lists here. We're not ready to go to planner yet. We still kind of like the look and feel of tasks because it looks like project. And so, but you can't do subtasks in communication sites, but you can in a team site. I can still do a traditional task list and do subtasks and all that with a team site.
Any other questions?
So when a new Microsoft team is created, can we actually run like side scripts or things like that so that it automatically modifies the theme and all of them? I'm just curious like that.
Because it's very similar to what she is asking, right? Because kicking off a flow as soon as.
Yeah.
I think you're thinking PowerShell?
So I want to do it in a script.
More like we automated the process of creating groups or like Microsoft Teams with Flow. It's good, but we want actually the site script to run after the creation of the team, because team would create a group, or the group would create the team from the group, and the group would create the SharePoint site behind the scenes, and it doesn't have the company theme, which I need to manually go or add myself into the group. And things get really dicey with creation of HR or finance sites because they don't want my name to be seen anywhere.
What do you mean your name's in my window?
So
you can do that with customization. You have a process that things for new sites that are created, and it goes applies governance to it, including branding and security, whatever else you need to do. But it's not like an out-of-the-box feature that you just turn on. If you want to talk more about it, we can talk about it.
All right. Any other questions? All right. I think that's it for us, Dave. David, you're on mute.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for having both of us here. Thank you. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Hey, Dave.
He was like, all right. So, next part of our meeting is our upcoming community events. We have Global Azure Boot Camp 2019. That is going to be next month at MIT. We have SharePoint Conference 2019. That's going to be May 21st at Las Vegas, Grand Las Vegas. And SP TechCon Boston. It's going to be August 25th through 28th.
One more to add to this list. So Dave mentioned during his presentation that SharePoint Saturdays are a great way to go and learn PowerShell. The next upcoming SharePoint Saturday in this area is going to be down in New York City at the end of July. Registration is open. It's a free event. It's a full-day event. So you might want to sign up for that because they tend to sell out. And then the SharePoint Saturday in New England is going to happen, I believe it's October. So if you don't feel like traveling all the way to New York City, you can hold back and you'll have a lot of the same type of great content. But every one of these events does have different speakers. It's all on a volunteer basis. So like in New York, we'll probably get more New York-based speakers. We get more Boston-based speakers and so forth. There's also one in Montreal coming up fairly soon as well. I want to say May, but I could be off on that, which is also, not too far of a drive.
Very good. Any other events that anybody knows about that we might be missing?
SQL Saturday.
What's that?
SQL Saturday.
SQL Saturday?
Yep.
When is that?
30th of this month.
30th of this month, SQL Saturday. Where is that? Is that online? Right here? Microsoft Burlington. Awesome, thank you. Anything else?
I think there is a flow summit going on sometime end of the month.
At the end of this month?
Yeah. Yeah, Power App Summit, yes.
Yeah.
Power App Summit.
Power App Summit.
Yeah, the 27th. It's a free web-based summit for Power Apps.
27th.
This month. Next week.
Next Wednesday.
Power Apps Summit. It's an online Power Apps.
Very cool.
Free.
All right.
The Power Apps. Join
Yeah, some other user groups that we have in the area. There is also a PowerShell group.
What it handles, like
You
change
can
out.
check them out.
Remember the Power BI because it's all now about power.
Last year,
You
they
should have a Power BI
All right.
as well. Very good stuff.
Yeah, you might even find them at Power Apps 911.
All right. And then coming up is, so next month, we're going to be discussing real-world Office 365 external collaboration with Scott McFadden. So that's going to be on April 18th. That's for the next session for this group. And apparently our location is unknown. Apparently our location is unknown. It'll either be here or at NERD. So one of those two. I'm sorry, NERD is 1 Memorial Drive in Cambridge. The other Microsoft building. It's right on the, right near the Kendall campus, MIT campus. So other than that, any questions about not just the material that was covered, but anything else about Office 365 or anything else like that?
Quick question on 365. Coexistence of Skype for Business and Teams.
Yeah.
Is that ever going to get fixed?
I mean, it's a fine fix. Well, so we recently dropped the Teams-only coexistence mode. That's relatively new, and that's actually been really wonderful. They actually fixed a lot of the bugs. So if you can switch over to the Teams-only coexistence mode, life is a lot simpler there.
So each individual user, because we're not ready to do it all side.
Right. So what you can do is it has both tenant-wide settings and individual users. So what you can do is
that is about 2 weeks ago, and still was doing. Basically, my problem is most everybody else is on Skype for Business, and they would try to send me a message, and it would say, "Nope, he's on Teams. You can't talk to him."
No.
So it was giving me.
No.
What mode are you in currently? Are you in Skype only mode? You might be.
No, I went back to
or island mode.
No, not island. It's coexistence, isn't it, or it's not different?
So coexistence has 3 options as a drop down. There's Skype only mode, island mode, which is Skype to Skype and Teams to Teams.
Yeah.
And then there's Teams only, which basically will redirect Skype
Yeah.
messages
Okay.
into Teams.
Our site, our tenant is island.
Okay.
But then I tried to change myself. It's Teams only, thinking that would at least let me.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a Microsoft has done an article that does a really deep dive on all of those coexistence modes. I would highly recommend going through that. And the easiest way to get to that article is actually click on the Learn More link that's right on the same page with that coexistence mode.
Okay.
My understanding, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that if you're going to mix individual users, and you want the tenant-wide coexistence to be on one or the other, and never on islands. Because islands kind of disables the ability for users to cross between the two. Okay. Because islands is specifically all Skype messages get routed only to Skype clients.
Okay.
And that might be all Teams only get routed to Teams.
Where do you set that setting?
You go into the Teams admin console, and then under settings, there's a option called coexistence.
And the one that's Teams only, that'll work for both.
What's that?
If you're a Teams guy, you can get to somebody who has a Skype, right? Or if it's Skype trying to get to a Teams, so that Teams only one will work on both of those, right? That's what you're saying?
If you're in Teams only mode, yes.
That's the one that is.
Yes.
The Teams only, that lets the Skype people still talk to Skype or.
If you allow the Teams people can talk to Skype people, so if you're in Teams only mode, then those that you want to leave on Skype, you would need to individually assign them to Skype only mode. And you can mix and match those. But if you're in island mode, you can't mix and match.
I mean, you still go outside your domain, right?
Yes, none of this affects going outside of your domain. This is all just internal only.
Gotcha.
Because you're telling me that as good individuals, have the wrong script or whatever to write.
Well, what you would do is if you want to stay, if the majority of your company is on Skype for Business, you would leave it on Skype only mode, and then just assign for the individual. And then when you hit that crossover point, you flip the tenant, and then you reverse all of those settings on the individuals.
You need to write a script.
Yeah, I was going to say fancy PowerShell script.
Yeah, that's PowerShell script.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yes, it is. Any other questions?
I don't know if anybody knows with the shared links. I know you can turn them off on the site level. You can turn them off at the library level.
Not quite.
I didn't think so.
No, just at the site collection level.
Well, there's still support that's got the business on the front.
So I learned something 2 weeks ago. Content types and templates don't work very well anymore. So if you're using Modern and you're used to doing a template library and you take your content type and point it to a document in a template library, like, let's say, contact template, doesn't work anymore. You get an error. No, didn't work 2 weeks ago. Worked 3 weeks ago, but 2 weeks ago it stopped working. And then, so what we discovered was you couldn't attach a document either unless you run a PowerShell script that allows for pages. And Brad Patch knows what that PowerShell script is. I'm not a developer, but he was able to do his magic, and we were able to manually shove a document template into a content type and get it to work that way.
I have a document library where we're using custom content types. It's actually called Bloginator, and we have a content type for blog posts, for web pages, and for LinkedIn articles. 3 separate things, and each one of those indicates a different Word template that is filled in. The whole thing is actually done in a modern Teams site, and it works beautifully.
It was a team site. I tried to do it, like I said, 3 weeks ago I was able to do it. 2 weeks ago, got an error.
Okay, so that could be something specifically that's going on there. I know system-wide, it is possible to do that.
I tried it also on my own Office 365 account, got the same error.
Okay. What's the error that you're getting?
You just cannot do it. I forget the exact, I don't have my laptop, my work laptop with me.
Okay.
I took a screenshot of it, shared it with Brian. What's going on here? Until the
shoot me a copy of that screenshot.
We'll try. Yeah.
Let me see what I can find on there. So that's definitely not.
It was weird. It was like three weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I was able to connect to a document and a template, but the behavior was different from what I normally saw. But instead of opening up that document, like you would expect to see when you click on New, it brought me to the template library, where I had to choose that document. And then, like I said, a week later, I tried to do it, and I got the error. Couldn't make it up at all. And then Brad and I spent some time messing with it.
Yes.
This is maybe a silly question, but is there any way to escalate a support ticket without going through all the nonsense? When you get to the lower level and you have to spend 3 days before. Yeah. Is there anything you can do if you don't work with a partner?
So there are 2 options there. You can either work with a Microsoft partner, or you can purchase any number of Microsoft support plans.
Yeah. And then you can go right away.
Yes, so typically if you like, for example, if you have like a Premier support plan, then you'll have someone assigned to your account that if you're not getting the right attention on a ticket, you can escalate, and they can escalate that ticket to someone more senior. But furthermore, you also get automatically bumped up higher in the queue when things come along.
Thank you.
The Premier plans aren't cheap, but if your organization has a lot of Microsoft investments, it makes a lot of sense.
1 ring-a-ding versus 2 ring-a-ding.
What's that?
1 ring-a-ding versus 2 ring-a-ding. Versus 2 ring-a-ding.
So did you guys discover the new location column? There's a new column.
Is it out yet?
Yeah, it's out. We discovered it. I discovered it last Thursday.
Okay.
By accident.
I was looking for it, I think a month ago, and you said it was out.
Yeah, it came out. Yeah, the thing said February 28th. I think they said it came out, but I didn't notice it until my colleague that I'm training, she wanted to do a column called location, and she goes, "Oh, there's a location column." I'm like, "Huh? I never noticed it before."
Oh, yeah.
And I found it in Tech Note. So it's a geolocation column that apparently hooks into Bing Maps if you want to use it that way.
Yes.
Got all this coordinating.
That's our first new column in how many years? 8, 7, 8 years? It's a long time.
All right.
Yeah, it's a long time.
So next, I'm thanking Glenn to Turn Digital for all the drops. Oh, is anybody hiring? You're looking for work?
So we're looking to hire 2 Office 365 secretaries in the Boston area. If anyone is looking for a career shift, come talk to me.
So if anybody wants to go work for Turn Digital, which is very generous, they go for our group. I highly recommend it. See Dimitri after the session. Or if you know anybody, you can tell me. All right.